For the next hour, we're talking with George Michael, and let's start with the unseen part of your life. Are you very private? Do you dislike autograph hunters, for example?
Yeah, I don't mind at all. I think it completely comes with the territory. Why should I complain about that? You know?
Some people do.
Yeah, people who have a strange perspective on things, I think.
Sharon McVitie says, when you first released Listen Without Prejudice, you said that you would never do interviews again unless you had something specific you wanted to say.
Well, I should be very, very clear about this, really. The rest of the world, I've done one other piece of promotion, which is an MTV interview. Right now, MTV isn't that powerful in England, and I thought I needed to do something here for a very specific reason, which is that last year, my involvement with the Red Hot and Dance project, which was also to benefit AIDS care and research, I felt it was really poorly handled by my record company, which is one of the various reasons that I'm having problems with them at the moment. But the end result of that was that I felt that my contribution to that charity was nowhere near what it should have been, and it actually hindered them in other ways in terms of the other artists on the record. And basically it just didn't achieve what I wanted it to in terms of raising funds. And I thought that if I was going to get involved this time, maybe I should compensate for how badly that went, in my eyes anyway, and do a little bit of promotion that I had said previously I wouldn't do. I mean, it doesn't actually change my policy. I won't be promoting my own next album, or, you know, this is very specifically for the 5 Live EP and to help that along.
You also said at the time that you said you didn't want to do interviews, that all the answers to any questions anyone wanted to ask you will be found in Bear. While Bear's a good document of your career, there's a lady here who would argue that it's not very revealing about your personality.
Well, I don't know about that, really. I think it's fairly revealing about my personality. It's very boring as well, unfortunately. I think that I think at the time of that book, which is the same time that I decided I didn't want to do any more promotion. Mm-hmm. I was just I think I just needed to lighten up a bit, really. Looking back on that period of time, which is now about 3 years ago, I guess, I think I just needed to lighten up a bit. And I did a series of interviews for the book over about a 6-month period, which I think I was just a little too introspective and, I don't know, had my head up my bottom for a little while. And I don't regret the book. I just think that it could have been a little bit, just a bit lighter, really.
So can we talk about you? Because you said earlier on, before we started rolling tape on this, don't make it too heavy.
Don't make it too heavy. Yeah.
Why?
Well, because I think I've been in situations where the interviewer is as much responsible for the way the interview turns out. And often, if an interviewer wants to take you along certain lines, it's very hard to come out of it with anything other than a fairly, heavy interview. And I'm not a very heavy person. You know, I just don't think it's very, well, I've been eating a lot lately, but in general, I don't think that's not really representative of me. To sit down and talk about very heavy subjects for an hour is not what I would do at a dinner table or whatever. And
so who is George Michael? Wacky and zany?
I told you
clean film on the lavatory? Is that what we're talking about?
No, we're not quite that, but, you know, I just think that I don't want to take myself too seriously in general, really, you know.
You did for a while, though, didn't you?
Yeah, I think I probably did as a matter of compensation for Wham. You know, people were busy dismissing me when I was younger, and probably with good reason. But I think I probably tried to compensate a little too much, and I think now I feel like I don't need to do that. You know, I can just be myself, really.
I want to talk about the AIDS issue. Mm-hmm. It's very relevant this week because, as we were talking earlier on, there's a huge march. I think the best thing we can do is say the motivation behind releasing the single or the EP is what?
Well, I'm not going to pretend it's completely 100%, you know, just out of the goodness of my heart. It is primarily to aid the Phoenix Trust and to commemorate Freddie Mercury.
Now, what does the Phoenix Trust do?
The Phoenix Trust was set up by the remaining members of Queen. And I mean, you'd have to ask them about the detail of it, but basically it's a charity that will provide funding for AIDS education and research and care, I would imagine. A lot of
Why is this so important? Because AIDS doesn't take as many people as cancer does.
No, this is true, but cancer research is very, very well funded because so many people have been affected personally by it. There is an awful lot of funding for it.
How do you feel about those people who say, and it's proven, I suppose, by the death rate, that AIDS takes for the most part gay people and people in the artistic community, and therefore it's a minority thing?
A minority is still a minority, talking about millions and millions of people right now. Millions of people around the world suffering from this, and those people's families. But regardless, I think there's another point, which is that there are varying viewpoints on this, but I think the only real question is how long it will take before the heterosexual community sees and understands, and unfortunately is and suffers through AIDS. But it is going to happen. I mean, unless we find a vaccine or some way of stopping the HIV virus, this will happen. It's just a question of time. Therefore, I don't think you can say we're premature in raising awareness and funding for care or something like that. I think, unfortunately, it's likely to be a problem that's going to stay with us. And I think that people who feel, there's very little way of getting through to people who would actually feel that drug addicts and homosexuals deserve to die. There is very little you can do about people who are as bigoted as that.
I don't think the majority of people who believe it's a gay disease would adhere to that, do you?
Well, I think by saying that it's a minority thing and we shouldn't be concentrating, you're basically saying that, yeah. Doesn't really, homophobia or people's lack of understanding of heroin addicts, etc., they're sad, but they're very human things that we've lived with for millions of years. It's very difficult to change them. But the people who don't feel that way maybe and people who may be far more reasonable than that, it's those people, I suppose, that you want to reach and say, okay, well, if you believe that these people should be helped, then maybe you should contribute. I'll be perfectly honest here. This record, I don't really want to play too much on the charity angle of this, because I think it's 1993, and I think that people are pop music has been totally saturated with charity, and I think to ask people to go out, especially in the middle of a recession, and buy another charity record for the sake of the charity is a very difficult thing to do now.
So why agree to it?
Because I also think it's a very good record.
Fair enough.
This is my point. I mean, I'm not asking people to do any charitable. I'm just pointing out here. Right. This is the record. By the way, have you heard it? Do you like it? Would you like to buy it? Please do.
One of the newspapers yesterday had a piece about AIDS, which I think represents a viewpoint of this country, saying we shouldn't be wasting money on research.
Well, basically, the piece in the Sun, which I read, it was The Sun Says, of course, the wonderful Sun Says section. They are basically condemning, really, the government's involvement and contribution, which I'm sure is not that impressive as it is, to looking for a cure for AIDS, putting money into research or care. I can't remember exactly what the comments were. But they were condemning it because they feel that the new figures are more evidence to suggest that this epidemic is going to stay a gay epidemic or a gay and drug abusers epidemic. And there are two questions here. One is, it's so obvious that by saying that, you are asking the country to agree that it is not worth saving the lives or spending taxpayers' money on people who are dying from a sexually transmitted disease if they're gay or they're drug abusers. And I think that is such a totally revolting attitude to take. And this is supposed to be a Christian country, it's supposed to be a Christian society. I can't believe that people can agree with that. But the other point, of course, is that there are definitely different factions who are trying to prove different things. There are people who will come up with, I'm sure the people that gave me the figures that I talked about at Wembley, which said 40 million people will be infected with HIV by the end of this century, those people are trying to make a certain point. And the people who also will come up with figures to say that there are very few heterosexual people going to be affected in the future are coming up with a different angle. They all have their point to prove, and the figures are probably, the reality is probably somewhere in between. But I would say that I have talked to children that have AIDS. I've talked to the fathers of women who have AIDS, and I would say that those people would disagree with that viewpoint very strongly, and that whatever the proportion and speed of the epidemic in the heterosexual community, if we don't find some way of combating the disease, it is going to happen. Whether it's to a small degree or a large degree, it should be irrelevant. Many people, heterosexual people, are dying at this moment. Many people will die, and those people should be taken care of. Simple as that. We should try and prevent it from happening if we can, but those people should be financed and supported, because the fact that they got a sexually transmitted disease does not mean they should be condemned to death without any care. There are people who will probably sleep with someone without a condom this evening because they read that piece. It could be the thing that just if they're umming and ahhing as to whether to be careful with a stranger, it could be the thing that loses them their life. How anyone can sit in an office and write a piece and print a piece like that without that on their conscience is totally beyond me. And I think that those people really need pulling up, by someone. God knows who should do it, but someone should stop them because they're risking people's lives.
We're talking with George Michael on 1FM. At the Freddie Mercury gig, when you walked on stage, the whole place erupted. And I wondered, do you recognise star quality in yourself?
I suppose if I didn't recognise star quality in myself, I would never have had the confidence to do what I've done. But I find it a very separate thing. I think that's one of the things that's kind of lucky in my case, is that I see it as very much something that I can take out of a little box and put on, and then go on in front of however many people and do that, and then walk off and go home. You know what I mean? It's very much. I don't believe in George Michael. The image that obviously I have cultivated is something that I've very much cultivated for a purpose. I don't believe it is me. It's part of me. Everything you do is a part of you, whether you see it as a yeah. So it is there, but I don't see it in my everyday life at all, and I'm uncomfortable with the idea of it being in my everyday life.
All right, I accept that absolutely, but still, when you walked on stage, there were people half a mile away, like me. There he is. You're aware of it. You must be aware of it. You must have been aware when you walked on stage and you heard that roar. They knew it was you, even though they couldn't. They saw a matchstick wobbling across the stage. Same with Elton.
It might have been because Roger Taylor just said, "Here's George Michael." You don't know, but I mean, I know what you mean. Yeah. I'm always, put it this way, I'm always relieved when that happens, especially in front of especially in front of an audience of various. People who are there to see various people, or that was a predominantly Queen audience, I really am. I'm always nervous just before that, and when I walk on, I get that feeling, and I know it's okay, and that people are still interested in seeing me, etc., etc. That's only a kind of subconscious thing, but I definitely am aware of the fact that it's always a relief when I get that feedback.
Very disciplined on stage as well. You don't move nearly as much as you used to. It's all fairly inward, and then there's a moment or two when you give out. Yeah,
I think that's something to do with the fact that I can never hear what I'm doing on stage, and I decided, especially at Wembley, that I really needed to stay right in front of the monitors and hear my own voice, because as I've got older, I used to throw myself around on stage like a lunatic for a couple of hours, and it was great fun, but really what I was trying to do was maintain a certain level of excitement in the audience, which is something that I kind of became, I suppose, addicted to, because the first time I ever went on stage, I was in front of 5,000 people and they were screaming.
Where was that?
Aberdeen in 1983. And I never had any experience of playing to audiences that weren't that worked up. So I've had to kind of wean myself off of that and realize that it's just as important to sing well as it is to keep people excited, And as my audience has got older, obviously I feel I'm able to do that. So by the time when it comes to something like the Freddie Mercury benefit, I know it's an adult audience, and I know that it's going out on TV. I know it's very important that I sing in tune, basically. So I'm a lot more still now. Yeah.
What is a great stage performance? Is it a combination of flamboyance and calm moments? Is it studied? Do you think it through before you do it?
Every tour is different, because every tour is that much later than the one before, and your audience has changed and your music has changed. Yeah. So I think, like for instance, with the Cover to Cover tour, it probably took me about 4 or 5 shows before I understood what I had to do. It's like you're never sure how different the reaction of an audience is going to be from one year to the next, because those audiences change, they get older, and they're there for different reasons. And sometimes you've got a new audience. You know?
Do they change? Can you feel the change when you walk on stage?
Yeah, I think so.
Can you?
Yeah, I think so. That's very apparent for me because I've gone from being somebody who was screamed at to someone who, to a certain degree, is maybe screamed at or whimpered at a little bit, and people who listen a lot more now. So that is a process of people getting older and getting more adults in, and you know, I suppose that's why it's so apparent that every time I play, there is a difference in the audience, so I can feel it every time. Yeah, because they're getting older. That probably never changes, you know. I'll probably have to wait for them all to get into their seats. You know, by the end of my career, I have a Zimmer frame section and they can all clutter them together.
I've always thought the most frightening thing for any artist must be when you do something quiet and you have that silence and you have to fill it. Is it?
It's not actually. They're the moments I enjoy the best, actually. Because these days I do actually get silence when it's called for, whereas there was a point... in America, to some degree, that's still the case. Really, there was a time when it was very difficult to keep people quiet. When I wanted to sing something that I felt, you know, with a fair bit of sensitivity, because there's still people shouting my name, and that's really very much died down. The shows at Wembley that I did for the Cover to Cover tour, which we actually took Papa Killer from, and what was the other one I'm calling you from? Those shows, I think, were the most wonderful shows I've ever played.
Why?
In terms, for me, anyway.
Oh, why?
Because for the first time, I was in front of an audience that I really thought, one was not just behind me, but wanted to listen. And there were points where you could hear a pin drop, and that for me was a brand new experience, and I loved it. But I think that I felt for once that for once as a singer, I was in control of the situation. You know, people were listening. I could affect them without interruption, you know, which that was a new thing for me.
When you play to an audience, a vast audience at Wembley, a stadium audience, do you know what they're thinking? Can you feel it?
You can, to some degree, yeah. That's why every night feels different. You can. There is definitely something. I think there's something very powerful about performing in front of large numbers of people. It's a moment where I genuinely feel like I am a channel for something. Because I can't compare that feeling with anything else in my life. The rest of my life, to me, is not that different from other people's lives. But when I stand up there in front of however many people, especially when it's a huge crowd, I know that there's something different about my life. Do you know what I'm saying? Those points are the points that I feel there's something which is being controlled from somewhere else. You know, I really feel that.
Let me ask you then, father figure, songs that reel off the mind. You know how personal those songs are to the individual. There may be 100,000 out there. Each one of them takes a different message. And each one of them possesses that song in a way that you probably could never possess.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
I think that's very, very important. I think that's one of the reasons that I think that it's very important to me that that you don't explain. You know, one of the most painful moments in my career for me to see is that awful. I did a program, the South Bank show, about 2.5 years ago, and I don't dislike the program. I think it was quite a good program. Again, a little bit too heavy, you know. There was a moment I begged them. I said, "Please, I hate it. Please take it out." But they insisted that it was a good idea. But there's a moment where I'm very, very uncomfortably explaining for about 2-3 minutes the lyrics to "Praying for Time," which is probably my favorite lyric that I ever wrote. But it's such a nightmare trying to explain what you've written, and it always takes away its potency. And they kind of begged me to do it, and then begged to keep it in. And for me, that's the worst thing I've ever done on TV was try to explain what I was feeling when I wrote that song. One, because I explained it hopelessly, you know, and secondly, because I think then it takes away from other people's interpretations. Whether people get it wrong, or I think with a good lyric, it doesn't matter whether people actually completely suss out what you're trying to say. What's important is that it's powerful to them.
Yes.
And there were a lot of messages, I thought, in that song that were lyrically powerful, but could be interpreted in different ways. And for me to go on TV and you know, blunder through a couple of verses of it was a big mistake.
Talking with George Michael. Do you work 9 to 5 as a songwriter?
No, I never do. I always have to wait for it to. It's never a matter of me sitting down and saying, right now I'm going to write a song. I can't do that. I wish I could. There are a lot of people that can, but I can't do that. It has to be something. What tends to happen is little pieces of lyric or melody will come to me at separate times over a period of a couple of months, and I normally gel them together at some point, but I really never force it. I can't. That's one of the disappointing things, actually, about the fact that when I stepped away from, appearing in videos, and actually that's another thing. I think people keep asking me, you said you weren't going to do videos, and you've got these videos out. Well, the truth is, what I consider to be a video is, what I used to do. If somebody wants to film me live, I'm more than happy for that to happen, because that's what I do. I sing.
Right.
I sing and I write, and I don't have to put anything on for that. I don't have to think of some storyboard or, different costumes. It's not painstaking. It's not time consuming. Whereas making videos in the way that I used to was very time consuming. But I'm very happy for people to see me sing live. I like that. That's fine. I thought that one of the results of doing less promotion was going to be that it would give me more time to write. And in fact, it didn't make me any more prolific. I had more time, but I didn't get any more prolific. I've been writing a lot this year for the Trojan Souls and stuff, but having extra time hasn't made a difference. I still find that I can only write a certain number of songs that I feel are valid to put out within a certain period of time.
So what happens? Do you have a storyline in your head? What? Or do you get a bunch of notes that you've written over a period of weeks together and say, there's something there? How do you do it?
I just don't analyse it enough. I can't say, it never happens exactly the same way. I would, but the only thing I can say is that it's very kind of sporadic, and I never sit down and think about it. It's always a process that's going on in my head.
And when do you know a song is finished?
Well, when it's actually completely mixed and finished in the studio. That's it, yeah.
And with the problems with Sony at the moment, are you still writing?
Yeah, I'm writing because the album I'm making an album that will be out hopefully within the near future. It's the project's called the Trojan Souls, and it's me writing for all my favourite singers. And so far, just about everyone has said yes when approached to do this project. So I'm very flattered and very happy to be doing this.
Is Trojan Souls George Michael saying, I've got this really major court case, I've got to do something, I'll drive myself mad?
No, it's all, it's very strange. My professional life has an incredibly, it has a very fortunate way of falling into place. The Trojan Souls was happening, and I was writing for it before the Sony court case came into being. And as it turns out, I just happen to be lucky enough, that because I produce and I write, that this is perfect for me. I get to release material. I get to work, not just sit around, sitting on my hands kind of thing. I get to release material, have my work out there while this thing is going on. Right. But it really wasn't planned that way. It wasn't planned that way. It was just something that happened.
So it happened. So tell me about it.
What, about the Trojan Souls?
Yeah.
Well, basically, I've had this idea for a few years of writing songs for other people, because I've never really been able to extricate myself from my songs. I've always written things and then thought, I can't give that away. I want to do that one. And I decided to go for it. So far, I've talked to and written for Elton, obviously, Aretha Franklin, a song for Brian Ferry, a song for K.D. Lang, hopefully a song for Barbra Streisand. I talked to her a couple of times about it. That, unfortunately, is dependent on Sony releasing her.
So are these songs that you've written and then you think, that would sound good out of so-and-so's mouth? Or are you trying to get a repertory company of people who you would like to write songs for?
Yeah, I've kind of worked it that I ask people if they're interested, and then I will write for their voice. That's kind of the way it works. That's the challenge for me.
So what makes the song? Is it the words or the sound?
Melodically and style, in terms of style, melodics and style for the artist, but the lyrics would be very personal to me. Yeah,
that's interesting.
One of the things that I think would be interesting is to have a lyrical theme to the album, which scans the album and is obviously about one person's experience, but sung by various people, male and female. I think that would be very interesting.
So when you do that, you're going to produce that, aren't you? Mm-hmm. Is it difficult producing your own work sung by somebody else? Someone with a very strong personality?
Yes, I mean, that's again, this is again another challenge, because in my own head I can hear my own voice singing these songs. Yeah, so that's going to be, I think it's a challenge, But the people that I've asked have such phenomenal voices, and I love their voices so much that I can't imagine me being disappointed in comparison to my own vocals.
It's a little bit easy and tactful. Is it easy to tell Elton or tell Aretha Franklin
what to do?
Yeah.
No, in a word. No, it's very difficult to tell them, and it's probably going to be very difficult for them to accept.
Will you?
No, Elton was fun. I worked with Elton before, and he's, Elton's, doesn't have a problem with things like that. Some of these other people I've never worked with before, so I have no idea.
It's always a problem.
What are you saying? Will I put my foot down? You mean? No, I don't think so. I mean, I don't think there'll be any problem that way. They're all great singers. So
you've had some dreadful things said about you.
Mm-hmm.
Do you read those things?
There was a period where I wouldn't pick up a paper because I was so sick of reading things about myself that weren't true.
Yeah.
They don't hurt me.
Why not?
Really? Because I understand that they are references to somebody that doesn't really exist in a way. Mm-hmm. And also because eventually, I mean, how long can things like that hurt you for? How long can they hurt you for? I mean, they can only, if something happens to you again and again and again, and you actually see that it doesn't really make any difference to your life, then it doesn't really hurt you, it doesn't threaten you. I don't mind, in terms of people's references to my sexuality, I don't think many people actually believe this of me, but I just don't really care, actually. It really doesn't.
What they think
it's really not important to me what strangers think about my sexuality. It really isn't. If people if they prefer to think of me as gay, fine. If they prefer to think of me as straight, fine. It's really of no relevance to me. The only thing that ever hurts me is when I feel that what I do professionally is, I am still hurt by people who put down my actual ability.
You mean the record or the concert?
Yeah, live performances or recordings and stuff. If people slag them off, it does hurt me because I think, like any artist, I have a healthy amount of insecurity about what I do work-wise. I think you have to have that to drive you on, and that is always prompted by people writing that what I do is crap.
So who do you trust to give you the right opinion and say, George, it wasn't that good tonight, you can do better. George, maybe the voice should be a bit of this. Is there a sort of galaxy of people who do?
No, there are a couple of people that are very close to me, close family and some close friends who are very honest. They'll say tonight wasn't great, or your voice wasn't right on tonight, etc., or they don't particularly like one track off the album or this or that. I get that, and I trust that, and it's always done. The people that I listen to always do it very constructively. And by now, in all honesty, when somebody completely slags off something that I've done, I can always take comfort in the fact that I'm hardly going to get rave reviews in my position. You know what I mean?
Not?
Because I'm in the safest position. And when you're in a position like mine, where you can presume that something is going to get a lot of airplay and is actually going to sell pretty well, then you're not going to get the kindest reviews in the world unless you're in a certain area. And I'm in the area of pop.
The criticism, the innuendos, all that. How does your mum and your dad feel about it?
I'm sure it hurts them, but I think it would only really hurt them if they thought it hurt me. And they know that it doesn't. So I don't think they worried too much, really.
When there's a bad review, sort of banner headlines, George Michael has done something wrong, do you ring them up and say, it's not true?
No, never.
Do they ring you and say, is it true, son?
No, they ring my publicist and say, is it true? No. I never talk to anybody in that way. And I actually, pretty much no comment is if people really are ever going to, I think the papers know that if they go beyond a certain point of decency, basically, in what they're doing, then they're going to get sued. Simple as that. Just a matter of principle.
Some papers have said stuff about you that is eminently suable and you haven't.
Oh, yeah, but I'm saying beyond a certain level.
Who decides that?
Me. I think that there are certain things that really bother me, and there are certain things that don't,
Tell me what bothers you, then.
I get bothered when they paint me as someone who's very, very... the thing that... The last thing I can remember suing on was... the last thing I could do every week. Actually, one of the only things, actually. But the last time I sued The Sun, it was... or the only time I sued The Sun, it was over a story that said, it wasn't saying that, it wasn't anything really awful, but what it basically implied was, it said, I think the headline was, Wham's George in booze, shame, and it talked about me wandering into a club, throwing furniture around, saying, "Don't you know who I am?" and then vomiting over some poor hapless girl.
That was a long time ago.
Yeah.
Did you win?
I won, yeah. They had to pay 150 grand plus court costs, and that all went to a charity at the time.
Yeah.
The point was that they were making me out to be this arrogant and totally obnoxious rock star, and I suppose that it's the cliche of that annoys me more than anything else. And that, to me, bothers me much more than people talking about my sexuality or anything like that. I mean, I'm not bothered by those kind of things. I think somehow I'm just very offended by the idea that I'm this very brash, arrogant person.
Talk about a couple of things that you've said. I'd like to find out what you think. You've obviously read a great deal about it and thought about a great deal about it. But you do talk about sometimes a sense of destiny, a sense of having someone up there looking after. So the first question has to be, what does spirituality mean to you?
I think what it means, I've never been able to connect with a particular religion, because I find religion to be mostly, whereas it should be about comfort and understanding, I find it generally to be about control and fear. And I find that can't be, that's just not really, and I don't need those things. I don't need to be controlled. I don't need to fear things in order to live my life and find reasons to be good or bad, really. Religion is about control and morality. And my morality has always been simply that I work on a kind of loosely karmic basis. I really feel that in general, in my life, what I've seen is people who try to be decent to the people around them receive that in their lives and receive fairness when they try and act that way, you know. And I think the rules that I live my life by is that I would never want to do anything to anybody else. I never want to put anybody else in a position that I would not want to find myself in. And I never feel like I've walked on people or made enemies in the business, or I feel like I've tried to do my best to be decent to people. And that is enough for me. That's how I make my decisions on what is right and wrong. And I was taught that very strongly by my parents, so it comes quite naturally to me. And in terms of any other spirituality, I do believe that there are, I could never begin to explain in my own head the basics of life, infinity and those kinds of things, life and death. Eventually, I realised I have no idea about these things. So how can you be closed to anything? I find it very hard to say this is for sure and this is not for sure. I find it very hard to put boundaries around life. So I'm just open to anything in terms of spirituality.
Is there a God?
I think there has to be. There has to be someone who can make some sense of all this. As I get older, I look at life around me, and I look at the children my godchildren in particular, and I look at the incredible, just how incredible life is in certain ways. It's also very wicked in other ways that I've come to understand as I'm older, and I'm very, in some ways, scared by. But it's so incredible, just, the things you see day to day are so incredible and so inexplicable that there has to be a God.
Do you ever go to church?
Not for any other reason than
weddings.
Weddings and funerals and christenings, yeah.
What makes you laugh?
What makes me laugh? Cheers. I laugh at Cheers a lot.
Do you?
Oh, it's totally, I've become, in America, Cheers is on at 11 every night, and they run. Actually, in America, you can watch Cheers 3 times a night if you want to, which I do, actually. It's terrible. It's incredibly well played and fantastically written, yeah. I'll be very sad when that comes off the air.
Do you have any British shows that you watch
that I really like? I love French and Saunders. I think they're great.
What's so funny about them?
About French and Saunders, I just think they're hysterical. Just all their. You're not a French and Saunders fan?
Yes, I am.
You are. I just think that they're hysterical. Just the way they use their bodies to ridicule themselves. I think they're brilliant.
So it's the kind of comedy you don't like. Pratfalls, you don't like Banana Skins.
No.
You like observation.
Yeah.
What I talked about cling film when we started talking on the lavatory, which is not you.
Not me, no.
That's Gary.
I'm more a Baker foil. I'm not very clever with these things.
Do you? Remembering the gag that Elton pulled on Gary Farrow a couple of years ago, which has to be one of the great all-time stunts.
Yeah, the posters.
The posters, yeah. Which was a wonderful... does that sort of thing amuse you?
Oh yeah, I bought a new house, and I'd been very successful in keeping people away and not having people know where I lived, basically. And I would never answer the door to strangers. And basically, Elton sent round, I can't remember what it was. I think it was a hamper. He sent me around a hamper, and for some reason he sent me a hostess trolley, which was really funny. He sent it with this person that obviously had been told who it was for. So when I didn't answer the door, someone was walking around my house. This guy was walking around the house, and I thought it was press. So I literally hid in the bathroom for about 2 hours. And eventually when they went away and I opened the front door, I had this Fortnum & Mason's hamper on my front step.
This was a joke?
Yeah, this was a joke, really good joke. I was sat in the bathroom for hours.
So practical jokes you don't like?
Oh, I do, yeah. I do. I just at that one, I really thought it was press, so...
What upsets you? You said you had a hell of a temper. What makes you cross? What can I say?
No, there's nothing you can say. You wouldn't want to see my temper, I promise you, Simon. It's the most vile and horrible thing.
Really? You've learned to control it?
I learned to control it. Well, it only really comes out when I'm in a very bad state anyway. If I'm having a hard time personally, or if there's anything that's really worrying me, then it will come out, and that hasn't happened for years. But when it does, it's really something very strange. I mean, I've ended up in fights with people, physical fights with people I care about very much, and totally regretted it afterwards. And but I find that with all kinds of strange things, I'm basically, my head does everything but my head, doing a full circle. My voice drops about an octave, and I suddenly get this very strong North London accent and just scream obscenities for many minutes on end. I think it's because it's such a contrast with my normal behaviour that when people around me have seen it, they're always very shocked by it.
Does it frighten you?
Yeah, it does, because I lose control completely.
Yeah.
And that is something that's very frightening to me. I'm very much a control freak.
Oh, do you remember the last time it happened?
It happened it was years ago, but the last time it happened with somebody that was Actually, I'm not going to tell you when it happened, because that would kind of really thrill the person that it happened to get a mention, so I'm not going to do that. Right. But it was quite a while ago.
Do you know how much you're worth?
Roughly.
Do you have a bank account?
I have several.
Do you ever check it?
Yeah, I do. I do simply to make sure that my accountants aren't ripping me off. I'm not particularly concerned. I'd say that I'm not worth anything like as much as the Sun would have you believe, and of course the Sun would have you believe that the figure raises every year, and in fact the figure gets less every year, because I haven't actually worked on anything or put anything out for myself financially for a couple of years.
So you're not one of Britain's 10 richest men?
I might be, I don't know. Oh, no. 10?
Yeah.
No, absolutely not, no.
How about your mum? Does she ever say, watch yourself, be careful?
What, money-wise?
Yeah.
No.
Did she ever?
No, it was always my dad, actually, that did that. My dad, on the third hit single, my dad was still telling me to save my money because no one would be buying my records in a year's time. It took him a while to actually appreciate that I was going to be a wealthy man, I think, on my own doing.
They're self-made people, and they're not rich by any means. Has it been a problem with them?
No, my family have been wonderful all the way, actually, in terms of my success in coping with it. And I come from a very close family, and I couldn't wish for better parents or sisters, really. I don't think anyone's had a problem with it. I think the only problem for my family is having to deal with the fact that people can be trying to get to me through them, and having to be wary of strangers and new acquaintances. That's probably the hardest thing for them.
When you first made money, did you buy your mum the bungalow?
I bought my dad a stud farm, funnily enough.
Really?
He raises horses.
Breeding what?
He raises racehorses.
You're joking, really?
There've been 3 born this week, actually. Three foals this week.
What, over the
It's wonderful. My dad's having the time of his life, and I think it's really a pleasure for me, because I know my dad's like in his mid-50s, and I know this is a problem age for many people, and it's like, oh, what do I do now? And my dad's he worked in a restaurant. He had his own restaurant for the last 17 or 18 years, and obviously my financial support has given him the opportunity to really go into a new field and love what he's doing. And at that age, I think that's a real luxury. I can't say that I really share my father's interest in horse racing. I went to the races with him when I was a kid and stuff.
Oh, he's a mud punter then, was he?
Oh, yeah. But no, I get great pleasure out of watching the pleasure that he takes from it, you know.
What do you do at Christmas? How do you balance out Christmas presents with the rest of the family?
Well, you know, in all honesty, I think it really depends on how you were brought up and what your attitudes to money are. The attitudes in my family to money are very healthy, so it's never been any kind of problem. Really? You know, I know it is in lots of problems with relatives and people coming to you for help with this and that. And, you know, it's not a problem. I've never once had anything with any of my family where anyone looked like they were after anything that they wouldn't otherwise expect, you know.
Let's get back to some questions. Your 3 contributions to Red Hot and Dance all had a much more dance appeal and feel than any of your previous work. Do you feel you're moving more into that kind of contemporary house scene? That from David in Essex.
Well, I think I was asked if I would contribute anything to Red Hot and Dance, and as it was a completely dance album, that was the logical thing to do, was to give them dance tracks. I really liked the tracks. I really liked the end result of the tracks that I'd done for Red Hot and Dance. I was just really sad that they didn't get heard more. I think there's a track that I think Radio 1 played it quite a bit. There was another track, not too funky, but a track called Do You Really Want to Know? Yeah. Which I think would have been a potential single, but by the time that was a possibility, it was obvious that Sony was not that interested in the album, so I thought it was a bad idea, you know, to go ahead with something that wasn't being supported. So I knocked that one on the head.
It gives an impression of a businessman with a very cool head as well, that you like the creative side, but you know exactly what's going to happen after you've finished the product. Do you think
to me, business is money, and I'm really not. I don't think I'm a businessman. I think I'm someone that really, you know, I work hard and I put everything I have into making pieces of music, and it's very important to me that once I've done my side, the creative side of things, that just in terms of the profession, what I've learned in the last 10 years, it's very easy for me to know when things are being done and when they're not. So I chase people up basically, and I go into the record stores and find out if they've got the stock.
Do you?
I check to see if things are being fly posted.
Wait a minute, how do you go into a record store and say, have you got a George Michael record?
Well, I walk in and I say, have you got the George Michael record? I don't actually know. I just go out and look for it and then see if it's in the store. And
really?
Yeah.
And is there hell to pay if it isn't there?
Absolutely.
We're talking with George Michael on 1FM. Can I ask you to project a little bit into the future and look at the way the music industry, if you like, is progressing? My
own little opinion is that the music industry will shrink because the singles market has become, you know, you don't have to sell very many records to chart. Yeah. There are far fewer adults bothering to go in to buy singles. And there are far fewer album artists of any real importance happening. So gradually what's happening, the music industry is crumbling in a way financially, because it's still this big machine. It's still this big machine here, which is going to have to acknowledge that the actual number of people buying records is going to shrink. Music is not as important to kids now as it was. Music for most kids, like when I was a kid, everybody was obsessed with someone. For girls it is. Boys are playing with Nintendo. Girls still care because of the romance, the exoticism. You see, but that's not to do with youth culture. Isn't it? No, that's to do with sex. But isn't youth culture sex, isn't it? It's part of it, but without it, if it's just about girls wanting to romanticize their favourite singer, then it doesn't do anything, and it doesn't. I'm not saying it's worthless. That's very valid, and that's what pop music is there for too. Right. But it doesn't move music anywhere. But great bands are not born out of bands that girls love and boys hate forever. Great bands are born out of people that a lot of girls love and some boys love, and then gradually, as that band progresses, they become something which means something to both sexes. But you're saying the music industry increasingly doesn't really mean anything to anybody. Well, doesn't mean anything. Music is always going to mean a lot to everybody, but music and youth culture, right, as a force, I think are far less important than they were, because they have become something which is not exclusive. They've become something which is just part of society. I still don't understand, though, if we can find a band, surely, that is so unpleasant to me, and I regard as a threat. No? Doesn't work like that? Well, it actually works to some degree, because that's what the whole grunge rock thing is about in the States. But the States I used to think that we would move in parallel with America on a different time scale, that we would always eventually have what they have. Yes. But it doesn't work that way, because America is such a completely screwed up society that they have very strong reasons for youth culture still to exist. The two reasons, really, I would say. One, are racism, and two, this total feeling of American kids that they've been left with this totally screwed up environment, emotionally and physically, whether it be AIDS, whether it be the environment. A lot of great youth culture comes out of anger and repression.
Yes, but there's enough of that, George.
Oh, I don't know if there's enough of that here to keep youth culture going. 16
to 20, unemployed?
No, I don't think so. They find various ways of... They don't seem to channel that into music anymore. I really don't believe it. I believe the generation that came up with house and or adopted ecstasy and rave music, the fact that 5 years later it's still happening has got to tell you something about youth culture. When I was growing up, you couldn't maintain a movement for more than 6 months. It was boring to people. Yeah. What it proves is that rave culture is really about ecstasy. It's not really about dancing or the music. Rave culture, for the majority of its life, I think has been about ecstasy, because that's what never gets boring to kids of 16.
That is a terrible thing to have to say.
Yeah, I mean, this is just my opinion. I'm probably completely wrong. I'm 29 years old and I haven't taken ecstasy for many years.
No, but what you're doing is condemning a generation.
Well, I'm not condemning them. I'm just saying that I don't think that music has its importance. It isn't just not as important to them. It's not as important to them to move on. It's not as important to them to explore with music. It's important to them to have a good time, same way as it always was.
And quite right too.
Absolutely. And I think that the reason that rave has existed for so long without anything pushing it out of the way, one, that there was nothing else really important to push it out of the way, and two, because the drugs continue to be fascinating and fun.
But kids. You're also saying there is nothing coming up to replace.
No, I'm just saying I can't see it. I think there's a real...
So who's the loser?
Oh, we're all the losers, aren't we? Because pop music is the most incredibly exciting thing when it means something. I don't believe that most of what I hear on the radio really means anything other than a lot of people, finding a way of making a bit of money and getting a little bit of glamour for 10 minutes. There's a lot of people in the industry now that have nothing to do with the industry in terms of talent. I don't want to be that.
Hasn't that always been true?
No, I don't believe so. I don't think there's ever been so many faceless and talentless people on television and radio. There's still some wonderful people out there, and
Is that because we're getting old?
I'm a musician. I'm 29. I'm not divorced from what those people are hearing totally in terms of my age. And as a musician, right, I know a good rave record from a bad rave record. Right. I know a good. I know a terrible cover version from a good cover version.
I accept that.
I think I know these things, and I just feel, as I think most people in the industry feel, that there is very little to work with these days.
And it's not coming up.
Well, it may be. I pray to God that it is.
You're now backing up.
No, it may be. It may be. I pray to God that I'm wrong. But in my opinion, I don't think that the cycle is going to happen.
There is a real problem with what you're saying, because you were saying earlier on, and you were right about you weren't adhering to the criticism, but you were saying that there is a problem that the oldies, people of my generation who are still around, are perpetuating a lot of things and not making way. What you're now saying is that there is nobody coming up to push them aside, and that's a dreadful thing.
But I'm saying, these are all different. These things all happened at different times, and I'm saying that I think one of the reasons we're in such a bad way, in the mid-90s, is because so much attention and time and money was spent on revamping older bands in the late 80s, which I think was a result of Live Aid, right? It probably would have happened anyway.
It's a fascinating conjunction.
I think the catalyst was Live Aid. But I think that's one of the reasons that we're in such a bad state now. But I don't think that,
But we can't swim out of it.
No. Well, who knows? I say, with what I can see and hear, that I think that pop culture is now going to have to take its place alongside a lot of other things for kids.
No, you're not saying that. You're saying pop culture is dying.
It will never completely die, but in terms of pop culture being representative of the whole of a generation at any one time, in England anyway, I think those days are over.
We're talking with George Michael on Radio 1. Now let's talk about the row between you and Sonny. What's the problem?
I would say there are two basic problems. One is that I feel that when CBS became Sony and was bought by Sony, I feel that the structure of the company changed very drastically, and their priorities as a company changed. I think it became much more corporate, and I'm not pretending for a moment that any record company, any major record company, is anything other than a financial concern. It's just that there are different ways of making money with music.
Can we talk about what CBS was then, rather than what Sony is?
I feel I can't really evaluate CBS. It's not as though I worked there. I feel that CBS was more concerned with in my opinion anyway, with the cultivation and support of long-term artists. They had such a history of great long-term artists and huge names that I thought they understood the value of that. And I feel that I would have hoped that 10-year history with them was some indication of a lasting history with them and of a future. And I feel that their belief in me when I decided that I didn't want to be in videos anymore, basically, especially on the American side, I think that their belief in me kind of disappeared. And whereas I don't necessarily feel that it's my right to criticize Sony for their new approach, because I feel that their new approach is very much geared to video artists. It's not up to me to decide how they make their money. I would just like to know that I feel that if I want to run my career as I'm now doing it, with less promotion and without the aid of certain types of music videos, I should be able to do that. And if they don't want their artists to work in the way that I do, then I should be free to go elsewhere. I think if you work and you're on the top kind of level of your profession, I feel that you should have the choice, as other people in other professions do, of working where you want to. And if they don't want to work with me the way I want to work, I should be free to walk away, because there are other people who definitely would work with me exactly the way that I work.
So it really comes down to the fact that you want to leave and they don't want you to leave.
No, what it comes down to is the fact that I want to leave, and they are perfectly prepared to make the kind of they would like to continue with my career in the way that they see fit. And I feel that in certain areas of the world, there are other people who would do a far better job simply because they can work and are prepared to work with someone who won't do certain things.
Are we talking here about an atmosphere, less of an employment than a partnership? Are we talking about that?
Well, yeah, exactly. I just feel that I've always, until CBS became Sony, I'd always worked very well with them. You know, I was a certain type of artist that they could deal with very well. They knew I would always deliver the goods musically. And I felt that there was a kind of mutual respect. And I think that changed when the company itself changed. And it's almost like,
why would it change?
Why would it change?
Can you explain that to me?
Well, because CBS had a history, and it was bought by people who ultimately do not have a history in the music business.
Yeah.
And as I said, however they want to run their company is fine by me. I just don't see why. My company was sold, and I had no say in that, obviously. But the fact that the company was sold to different people and is run in a different way, I feel is unfair. I don't think that I should be made to work with people who don't really feel that I'm an important artist to them. I think that I should be able to work with people who do think I'm an important artist.
Right. So thank you for that. It's very, very clear from that. Working environment, which people never think of. We're talking now about the partnership. We've moved on from Sony and CBS, and you've explained that very clearly, and I don't want to go on about that.
Yeah.
But it is interesting that you care so deeply about it that you're prepared to put yourself on hiatus. That's a hell of a thing to do. Do you feel that deeply about it?
I don't really feel like I have a choice, in all honesty. I feel like I could not go in and make my own next full George Michael album with the knowledge that it was not going to be promoted with full support. I have to say, at the same time as making these criticisms, I have to say that until the Red Hot and Dance album, I really feel that there was no problem in this country. Radio 1 supported me really well. I felt that people were hearing my music. That's the most important thing.
What is the most important?
The most important thing is that people hear it. If they decide not to buy it, then then I can accept that. If there is a lot of airplay on something and people decide not to buy it, I can completely accept that. What I can't accept, and what happened in large areas of the world, and luckily not in England, is that people didn't get to hear what I was with the singles that I was releasing. And in fact, in America, it got to a point where they wouldn't release the singles that I wanted to release. Luckily, in this country, it comes here, it will go to producers and DJs, and they make the decision as to whether they like it or not.
Absolutely.
That's the point. That's why I feel really justified when things do well for me over here. I know exactly why they're doing well. It's because people hear them, like them, buy them. In America, you never know why your record is either number 30 or number 1. You never know exactly why, because there are all kinds of financial factors involved. But at the end of the day, it means that if you don't work with
the
it,
system,
your music doesn't get heard. And basically, the money was pulled out of George Michael in America and in certain other countries in the world.
Do you know why?
Because I was not prepared to do the promotion I had been doing before. Now,
because
had I come to them, boy. Yeah, and basically, had I come to them and said, as a new artist at 27 years old, and said, "These are my songs. This is what I've got for you. Would you please promote me?" They probably would have promoted it to the hilt. But because they're used to someone who's been shoving their face in front of a camera for 8 years and saying, "Look, everybody, here I am and here's what I do," the fact that I was taking some of that away, they just thought, "Oh, well, if he's not going to try, why should we?"
So what we're talking about is George Michael not being a good boy and Tony.
Exactly. They were penalising me for that, basically, for changing my mind about the way I wanted my career to go.
You've also said that if you lose the case, you won't record again.
I won't record for Sony.
Well, that's if you.
But it's not going to happen. I'm just so convinced it's not going to happen. I'm convinced that one way or another, I will be free of Sony.
You appear to be very open and honest, or have you been lying for the last 2.25 hours?
I think I'm pretty open and honest, really.
When this is broadcast, will you listen?
Oh yeah. I'm not the type of person that pretends that everything to me is just kind of by the by and natural. I listen out for my own records on the radio. I listen. Well, I don't listen for interviews because I don't do them anymore. But I shall definitely listen to this one. And
any idea what you'll think at the end of it?
Well, I normally think in terms of, I know with my records, in terms of interviews and stuff, I normally look at it and think, "Oh, a tosser." I can't help it. That's normally what I feel. I'm very hard on myself in these kind of situations, but I think most artists probably are, and the ones that aren't normally are in for a fall anyway. I think if people feel that confident about everything that they do, they normally trip up somewhere along the way.
Final question to those people who would think you sound very hard on yourself and sometimes callous on yourself. What would you say?
I can be very happy with something in the studio. I can think, yeah, I've written that, I'm really pleased with it, I really feel like I've achieved something. But I will never listen, the records I love to hear of my own material, the majority, I tend to take a lot more pleasure in the ones that I know everyone else liked. You know, I love that confirmation. I'm proud of things, in general, I'm the most proud of things that I know did really well, not because because that was the thing that held me at number one for however many weeks, but because it's verification that you're doing something that people really enjoy.
Yeah, but I'm not just talking about music.
I'm talking about my life.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm not good at letting myself off the hook. No, I tend to agonize over my own actions quite a lot. Yeah, which is not a good thing, I suppose. But don't most people do that?
No, I think most people actually have enough little Phillips in their life to say that was a good one. To get drunk, relax, think, what a great garden I've done, or whatever I've done, that has been fun today. You strike me as a person who's very hard on himself.
I'm not the majority of the time. I really don't think so. I think if I was that hard on myself, I wouldn't have a good time. And I do, as far as I'm concerned, I spend more of my life having a bit of a laugh than most people get a chance to, which is good. I think probably in these situations, all the negative things about me pop up, I don't know, maybe I'm hard on myself professionally. In life, maybe that too. I'm just not very aware of it. Not very aware of it. What are you, my psychologist? Leave me alone. I have to pay someone 75 quid an hour to do this.
George Michael Talking to Radio 1 was produced by Simon Bates with technical assistance from Graham White, Paul Fahey and Alan Wright.